All right, here's the final part of your semester exam review. Starting with number 22, write an inequality to describe the restrictions on x according to the hinge theorem. So when I look at this problem, again, we can see that this 7 is the same length as the other side, and then they share this side. So I do have two angles that are included in between the two congruent sides that are not congruent. The 95 is bigger than the 85. So across from the bigger angle is going to be the bigger side. Across from the smaller angle is going to be the smaller side. So I can see that my x is bigger or greater than the 10. Or you could write it instead that 10 is less than x. You can write it either way. Both answers would be correct. So x is greater than 10 or 10 is less than x. Number 23. Write an inequality to describe the relationship between the lengths of DG and FG. So again, I can see that DE matches with EF. EG is reflexive, so they do have two shared sides that are in common, except the 30 is bigger than the 20. So that means across from the bigger angle will be the bigger side, and across from the smaller angle will be the smaller side. I now know that DG is bigger or greater than FG. Or I could write it backwards and say that FG is less than DG. Either way, you would be correct if you wrote it as DG greater than FG or FG greater than DG. 24. Write an inequality to describe the relationship between the measures of angle 1 and angle 2. So just like last time, I can see I've got a 10 that matches a 10, and I've got a reflexive side, and here's my included angles. I want to know which included angle is bigger or smaller. But before, what we did is we looked across from the bigger angle and across from the smaller angle to find the bigger or the smaller side. I can see the 12 is the bigger side and 11 is the smaller side. So that tells me that angle 1 must have been bigger or greater than angle 2. Or we could say that angle 2 is less than angle 1. Either way you want to say it, angle 1 is greater than angle 2, or angle 2 is greater or is less than angle 1. 25. There are 18 boys and 9 girls in an 8th period gym class. What is the ratio of girls to boys? Now, it's real tempting to go, okay, 18 boys, 9 girls, my ratio is 18 to 9. But you really do have to pay attention that it wants girls to boys. So that means it wants girls in the numerator, and it wants boys in the denominator. Okay, so when I do that, I've got 9 girls and 18 boys, and I can't just leave it like that. I have to make sure I reduce. So when I type that in the calculator, or if I do it with my brain, I end up with 1 to 2. The ratio of girls to boys is 1 to 2. Number 26. A bag of 13 marbles has 6 red marbles, and the remaining are black. What is the ratio of black marbles to red marbles? Okay, so black marbles to red marbles. Again, we need to make sure we pay attention to what it wants in the numerator. I want black marbles in the numerator, and I want red marbles in the denominator. So my black marbles, I don't know how many there are. My red marbles, I can see right here, there's 6 red marbles. For my black marbles, it tells me that there are 13 marbles. So if 6 of them are red and the remaining are black, that means that leaves 7 marbles left over as black. Okay? And so if you were to type that in your calculator, you would see that 7 over 6 does not reduce, so my ratio is 7 to 6. 27. A postage stamp 25 millimeters wide and 40 millimeters tall is enlarged to make a poster. The poster is 4 feet wide and find the height of the poster. So if I look at the first sentence, I see two things. I see 25 and I see 40. So if I were to make those into a ratio, 25 to 40, I have to make sure I know what each number means. So when I look at that, it's 25 millimeters wide. Okay? And the 40 millimeters is how tall it is. That way, when I look at the next part, it says the poster is 4 feet wide. So look where wide is. That's in my numerator. So I'm going to put 4 in the top. And I want to find the height. Well, the height is going to be how tall it is. That's what's going to go in the bottom. So then to solve this, I'm going to want to set these two equal to make a proportion and then cross multiply. Now, you may have set yours up differently, but as long as when you cross multiply, you have your x across from your 25 and your 4 across from 40, then you're still going to be okay. There's more than one way to set this up. Okay? So when I cross multiply, x times 25 gives me 25x. And 40 times 4 is 160. So then I just need to divide by 25 on both sides. And when I do that, I get x equals 6.4. And my units are, now my units for the first one were millimeters and millimeters, and since they're on the same fraction, they would cancel out, which means my units for the other ones have to be the same. So if it's 5 feet wide, that means it's going to be 6.4 feet tall. Okay, number 28. In a rectangle, the ratio of the width to length is 4 to 5. If the rectangle is 40 centimeters long, find its width. Okay, so it tells me in the sentence I'm doing, it tells me I'm doing width to length. So width is in the numerator, length is in the denominator. It tells me that ratio is 4 to 5, so 4 to 5. Okay, then if I go on, it says the rectangle is 40 centimeters long. Well, I can see my length, goes in the denominator. Okay, and I'm trying to find the width, which is in the numerator. So now all I need to do is cross multiply and solve. So I'll end up with 5 times x and 4 times 40. So 5 times x, 5x, and 4 times 40, 160. And then to get rid of the 5, I'll just divide it out on both sides. And when I do that division, I end up with x equals 32. And since I was 40 centimeters long, I will also be 32 centimeters wide. Number 29. If quadrilateral ABCD is similar to quadrilateral EFGH, write a proportion which will allow you to find x. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to look and see where I have an x. I have an x right here on HG, and then see what that matches. HG matches with DC. And then we have to decide what we want to have in the numerator or what we want to have in the denominator. And again, you don't have to pick the same one I pick, but I'm going to go with the smaller one and put that in the numerator. And just so I don't forget and I can stay consistent, I'm going to put an arrow in each one. So I'm going to put my x plus 7 on top. And then I'm going to put my 13 on the bottom. Okay? And then the other number I have is, I know that FG is 10. FG matches with BC up there in the top. So BC, which is 26. And then I remember that I want to put the 10 on top because that's where my up arrow is. Over the 26 on the bottom because that's where my down arrow is. And these are proportional, which means two equal ratios, and ratio is just a fancy word for fraction. So here is my proportion that will allow me to find x. And again, it just says to write the proportion. I don't have to actually solve. Number 30. If triangle LMN is similar to triangle TSP, write a proportion which will allow you to find x. So if you notice, my triangles have kind of been rotated around. So I do need to look and make sure I get the right sides together. On the last one, you could kind of just not have to look at it and you'd have been okay. But this one, you want to make sure you get the right things together. So starting with T to S, I see an x minus 1 here. So TS is going to match with LM, which is over here. And then we have to decide which one we want to put in the numerator and which one we want to put in the denominator. You can go either way. I like to put the smaller one in the numerator, but really it doesn't matter. So I'm going to put my up arrow on the left triangle and my down arrow on the right triangle. And I'm going to start with 8 over x minus 1. Okay? Then I'm going to look at the other piece that I know, and I know that PS is x plus 2. PS matches with NM. And then look where my up arrow is. My up arrow is on the side with the 10, so that's going to go in my numerator. And then my x plus 2 is going to go in my denominator. And these two ratios are proportional, so we put an equals in between them. Here is my proportion that I wrote to allow me to find x. Number 32. 31. If a flagpole, 24-foot flagpole casts a 20-foot shadow, at the same time the building next to it casts an 85-foot shadow, find the height of the building. So I've got my picture, but there's no numbers on it. So the first thing I want to do is I want to label my numbers. So I see I have a 24-foot flagpole. So here's my flagpole, and it's 24 feet. Okay? And it casts a 20-foot shadow. Now, a lot of us sometimes put the shadow in the wrong place, but if you think about being like outside in a parking lot and you look at where your shadow is on the ground. It's not leaving your head like some mysterious ghost figure. It's laying on the ground coming out of your feet. Your shadow is always going to be perpendicular to where you're standing, okay? So my shadow is down here, 20. It's not the diagonal, okay? It's not the hypotenuse. All right? So then, as I keep reading, at the same time, the building next to it casts an 85-foot shadow. So on the building, this shadow, which is on the ground, because that's where shadows are, is 85 feet. And I want to find the height of the building. So how tall is this building? Okay, so now what we want to do is just compare like things, okay? So I'm going to compare the height of the flag to the height of the building. So 24 to x. And then what you might want to do, just so you don't forget, put your up arrow and your down arrow, okay? Then I'm going to compare my shadows. So my shadows are 20 and 85. And here's my up arrow, so that means 20 is going to go on top, and 85 is going to go on the bottom. Okay? And these two things are proportional, so they will be equal to each other. Okay? It does want me to actually find the height, so I do need to go through and do my cross multiplication on this one. So I'm going to cross here and get 20 times x. And then I'm going to cross here, 24 times 85. 24 times 85 is 2,210. Okay, and then I will divide that by 20, which leaves me x equals 110.5. And then my units, if I look, everything is given to me in feet, so this will also be in feet. So that building is 110.5 feet tall. Number 32. If a tree casts a 24-foot shadow at the same time that a yardstick casts a 2-foot shadow, find the height of the tree. So this is pretty much the exact same thing, except instead of a flagpole, I have a yardstick, and instead of a building, I have a tree. Okay, so I'm going to start off doing the same thing. I'm going to compare the yardstick to the tree, and I'm going to put the yardstick on top so I don't forget. I'm going to put my up and down arrow. So 3 to X. Then I'm going to compare the shadow to the shadow, and since my up arrow is on the 2, that goes in the top, and my down arrow is by the 24, that goes in the bottom. Okay, these two will be equal, so now all I have to do is cross multiply and solve. So I'll cross here and I'll cross here, and again, you may have set yours up a little bit differently, but if you got the 2 across from the X and the 3 across from the 24, then you're still okay. I end up with 2X equals 3 times 24, which is 72. Divide both sides by 2. And X equals 36. And if I look, everything is given to me in feet, so this is also in feet. Okay. Number 33. In triangle IGU, WH is parallel to segment IU. So you might want to just kind of add yourself a little triangle. This is parallel to this, okay? WU is 13, which is labeled for me. WH is 20, which is labeled for me. And WG is 26, which is also labeled for me. I'm trying to find IU, and it already has an X on that for me as well. Now, here's the scary part. Because what I'm trying to find is the parallel side, I can't just start making proportions the way my pictures are. I have to think of my triangles as 2 separate triangles. So I've got the smaller red triangle, which has a 26 here and a 20 here. And then I've got this bigger blue triangle, which has an X right here, and this side right here is really going to be 26 plus 13, which gives me 39. Okay, so now I can remind myself that this was my parallel side, so I can see what matches with what, and I might want to do an up arrow and a down arrow so that I remember I'm going to do my 20 to my X, and that's going to be equal to my 26 over my 39. Again, you may have set yours up a little bit differently, but as long as when you cross multiply, you ended up with your X across from your 26 and your 20 across from your 39, you're still okay. All right, so I end up with 26 times X equals 20 times 39, which is 780. Divide both sides by 26. And when I do that, the 26's cancel. I'm left with X equals 30. Okay, I don't have any units, so I'll just leave it as X equals 30. 34. Find QP. Okay, so on this one, QP is right here. So I don't have to deal with this 22 that's on the parallel, which means this time I don't have to separate my triangles. I can use what we did just this past Monday with my proportional parts with my parallel lines. So I just pick any of the 4 things I see left over, the 30, the 10, the X, or the 32. I'm just going to go with the 30. Okay, and the 30 can either go over the 10 or the 32. The only thing you can't put it over is the X. I'm going to go ahead and just look across the triangle, and I'm going to put it over the 32. Okay, that's going to be equal to the one that's on the same side as 30, so the 10, and that's going to be over the X. And I know I've said it like a million times during this review, But you might have set yours up differently, just you got it right if you got your x across from your 30 and your 32 across from your 10. So when I cross multiply, I end up with 30x equals 320. And then I divide by 30. When I divide by 30, x ends up to be 10.6 repeating, so we're going to round to 3 decimal places, 10.667. And I don't have any units, so I can leave it right here like this. Number 35. In triangle ABC is similar to triangle JKL with altitudes BX and KY. I'm trying to find how far is it from B to X. Okay, so I'm going to put a little x right there. That's what I want to know. What's nice about my similar triangles is all of its parts are proportional with its sides. Okay, so if I look at A to B is going to match up with J to K. Okay, and then you just pick which triangle you want to put on top. I'm just going to go left to right, so I'm going to put this triangle on top and I'm going to put this triangle on the bottom. So I'm going to do 32 over 10. These two go together. And then for my other ones, I'm going to put this altitude in my numerator and this altitude in my denominator so that I stay consistent. So now I'm ready to cross multiply and solve because I know they're proportional, which means it's 2 equal ratios. Again, you might have set them up backwards for me. As long as your x is across from your 10 and your 6 is across from your 32, you're okay. Here I end up with 10x is equal to 6 times 32, which is 192. And then when I divide by 10 on both sides, I end up with x equals 19.2. I don't have any units, so this is where I'm done. Number 36. Number 36 is just like number 35. My triangles below are similar by the angle-angle similarity postulate, so that means that my altitudes here and here will be proportional to my corresponding side. So I can pick the side between the two congruent angles and the side between the two congruent angles. And then we just have to decide which one we want to put on top. I'll just go left to right, and which one we want to put on the bottom. Okay, so if I put the x on top because of my up arrow, then I'll put the 7 on top because of my down arrow, and then same thing with my 10 and my 8. 10 is on top, and 8 is on the bottom. These two will be equal. If you set yours up different, as long as your 8 is across from your x and your 7 is across from your 10, you're still okay. When I cross multiply, I get 8x equals 70. Divide both sides by 8. And x equals 70 divided by 8, which is 8.75. I see no units in my picture, so this is my answer. All right, number 37. Points D, O, and G are midpoints. What is the perimeter of CAT? Okay, I'm going to zoom this in just a little bit. I know that makes it all kind of wonky, but that's okay. Zoom it in just so it's a little bit bigger. If I have midpoints, that means I have medians. This right here is a median. So if that median is 12, then the side across from it is twice that. So this side is 24. Okay? And then here's another median, 10, which means the side across from that is twice 10. And then my last median is 8, so the side across from that is twice 8, 16. Okay? So then when it asks me for my perimeter of triangle CAT, It wants the triangle, not the angle, so that means I close it and finish out my triangle. My perimeter is going to be the 20 plus the 16 plus the 24. My perimeter of triangle CAT is 60. I have no units, so this is my answer. One more. Number 38. Points D, O, and G are midpoints. A to D is 10, A to O is 8, and G to T is 12. What is the perimeter of triangle DOG? All right, so again, I'm going to see if I can zoom this in without making it too wonky. I got a little bit crooked. There we go. All right. So when I start, first I see that from A to O, that's 8. If that's a midpoint right here, that means this whole side is 16, and the median across from it is half of that 8, which notice is the same number here because this is half of it as well. Okay? So then when I look at CT, if from A to D is 10, then it's also 10 here, which means that whole side is 20. Which means the side across from it is half of that 10. And again, same here, half of that 10. And so you can probably skip the middle step at this point. Probably you could have already skipped it. But again, the whole thing here is going to be 24, just so you can see it. Which means the median across from it is going to be half of that 12. Okay? This one says, what is the perimeter of triangle DOG? Here's DOG. So DOG, that means I'm looking at the 12 and the 10 and the 8. So when I add 12 plus 10 plus 8, I get a perimeter for triangle DOG of 12 plus 10 plus 8 is 30. And again, no units, so I am done here. Okay? All right, so that concludes our review, and just kind of a little reminder, Monday's a holiday. Yay, no school on Monday. And 8th period, you will be taking your exam in geometry on Tuesday. Okay, you'll be taking your exam on Tuesday. Okay, so let's see, the next one is going to be 4th period. You're going to take your exam on Wednesday. And remember, these 2 days are full days of school. All right, and next is going to be 2nd period. You'll be taking your exam, the first exam, on Thursday. Okay, so you'll come straight here on Thursday morning. Okay, and last but not least is 7th period. And you're going to take your test, the 2nd exam, on Friday. Okay, and these 2 days are half-ish days, meaning the buses will run at 1:15. So you'll get to leave a little bit early on those days. Okay? All right, well, I will see y'all next week, and have a great weekend.